Okay. Okay, so welcome everybody to my class on the Boxing Tunic. For starters, I have a few links that I have put in the group chat window for the Zoom meeting. That includes a link to the Artemisia University credit submission. So this is a class that has been registered with the University of Artemisia. So if you'd like to get credit for this as a costuming class, you can follow that link and submit class attendance. I also have the handout that I use for this class that I put in the group chat as well. So that's a Word document from the Boxing Tunic, and I'll be referencing that and bringing that up shortly. I also have a link to the Varberg Museum in Sweden, where the Bocksten Tunic is housed. That is one of my primary sources for this, because it is the complete dissection of the outfit, and it has all kinds of pictures that I'll be going back to that in a second. But the link to that page is there. There's also a link to a website called Ancient Origins that talks about the theory and supposition of what happened to the Bocksten man, and why, when he was found, he had 3 wooden stakes driven through his body. Kind of a curious way to find remains. So the general supposition is that he was a businessman of sorts, or possibly a recruiter for soldiers, and going town to town. He was certainly a man of some upper or lower level nobility, certainly a man of some wealth, and he was likely murdered in a robbery. And then his body was staked to the ground, and actually the tunic itself has like 3 holes in it where wooden stakes were driven through him to basically pin him down in a bog to keep his body from floating up. So yeah, the thing on Ancient Origins kind of goes a little bit more on the theory and supposition on that. I've also sent a link, added a link to my YouTube channel. When we get done with this class later today, this class will be available on my YouTube channel there as well. And Maud says she's only seeing the one link. Is everybody, if anybody else looks in chat, can you see either the handout or the other links that I provided? Or do you only get that if everybody's already in?
I can see your link to your YouTube channel, but I cannot see the link to the handout yet.
Okay. Looks like I'm gonna have to resend all those.
Okay.
I thought it would just be available. So let me put those back out there. Okay, did you get all those? Okay. All right, so. Sorry, we're just bringing up links and stuff. Okay, so the Boxing Tunic is part of one of the best complete sets of garb that we have in extant from the Middle Ages. It was an outfit that was found in a bog in Sweden in 1936 in Varberg, not far from where the museum is that the tunic is housed in. Kid was just harrowing for peat in the bogs and came across this thing, and so they've done quite a bit of research on it. There is a book written by one of the scientists from the museum. Her name is Margaret Knockert. And it's there's a book on the Boxing Man. I don't have a link to that immediately, but that's kind of the definitive work on what this is. But it is like I said, it's a complete set of clothing. We have the tunic, the hose, the cloak, the hood, the shoes, the pouch. We have everything. And for as far as extant outfits go, this is something that we have that is concrete evidence of this outfit being worn in the Middle Ages. And that's why it's really important to us. The carbon dating on the entire outfit dates somewhere between 1340 and 1370. And so this is right in the middle of the 14th century. And even though it's found in Sweden, there are some people that refer to this as a Viking age or a Viking era tunic. But by the time the 14th century came around, the idea of Viking age is really not applicable. There's the early Norse stuff, the Scandinavian stuff that we think of as classic Viking era stuff, but that's 8th, 9th, 10th century stuff. By the time you get into the 14th century, all the fashion comes out of France and England. And being that far north up in Sweden, you're probably looking at, this is something that would probably be up to 100 years later than would have been seen in England. But the thing about this particular construction is it is consistent with construction from some of the stuff you find in woven into the earth, which is the Greenland finds, which is more Viking era stuff. So this is an outfit that would have easily been worn for at least like 200 years prior to the dates that this is dated to, and likely 100 years after at least. One of the ways I came upon this particular outfit is a lot of my outfits in the SCA used to be what I refer to as SCA chic, code RDs, things that look good at 100 feet or 10 feet even. But I'd realized that the code RD is kind of the suit and tie of the Middle Ages. This is business wear, and people in the Middle Ages didn't wear that. That was court garb. That was clothes you wore to do business in. And we didn't wear that. You didn't wear code RDs all the time. So I started looking for things like, what would the common man, what would even the lower level nobility that we're all expected to be, what would that person be wearing? And that's kind of how I stumbled on the Boxten to begin with. And what you'll notice is a lot of the manuscripts that you see, like even in the Duc de Berry Book of Hours, which is a little bit later 14th century, the Tres Riche Book of Hours for the Duc de Berry, you see these manuscripts, either Book of Hours or calligraphy manuscripts that show people working in the fields, and they've got their chasses and their brays, and their hose rolled down to their knee, and running around in their underwear. But the tunic that they're wearing in most of those manuscripts is basically the Boxten Tunic. Some of that is, when you're looking at a lot of those manuscripts, a lot of the images that you see in those manuscripts are drawn somewhat stylized, but more like simple, because you're giving an impression of what it's like to work in a field, but it's not really. It's not full. It's not the portrait type characters that you see even in Elizabeth. By the Elizabethan time period, where you have the classic portrait of Elizabeth, that again that's how she wanted to look. And so if somebody's going to paint a portrait of Elizabeth, they actually had a template that was this is what Elizabeth looks like. So if you're going to paint Elizabeth, this is what she looks like, and then you can paint clothes around that. But this is what she wants to look like. This is the template that you use for that. But for the manuscripts, they're very simple drawings of, you know, people and giving them an idea what it looks like. But the tunics that they're wearing in those manuscripts, that's the Boxing Tunic. It's basically what it is. So this is something that was, it was an outfit that is very simple in its construction, as I'll show you shortly. It was meant to be an off-the-shelf, one-size-fits-none sort of outfit. It's something you can buy from a tailor, you know, that doesn't have to be fit necessarily, but you can make it yourself, because it's all straight line construction. It's all very simple to do. And it is what the common man was wearing in the 14th century, and like I said, at least 200 years before, probably another 100 years after. So in general, that's why the Boxing Tunic is important to us as an outfit, because we have definitive proof of its existence, and when it was made, or when it was worn, and how it was made, and the analysis they've done on this, on how to make it, is really pretty spectacular. So if anybody has any questions at any point, feel free to you can use the little raise hand icon on the Zoom, or you can just come on screen and ask questions as well. So so that's a little bit about what it is, and why it's important to our research. And one of the reasons that I like to teach this class is because, you know, back in the early days of the SCA, we had this thing called the T-tunic. Which was, you know, that reasonable attempt at pre-17th century stuff, right? But the T-tunic, as you cut it out, is, you know, you cut out the whole thing, including the arms, out of one piece of fabric, and it ends up being just a horrible waste of fabric. And so by doing this Boxten Tunic, we can give you something that that is more period correct, and that uses less fabric than even a T-tunic. And it's actually, I mean, it's just as easy to make as a T-tunic is, honestly. So this is my attempt to provide people a better, more period tunic that is not horribly complicated to do. That is, you know, takes up even less fabric than you know, what we started with. So one caveat on the differences between the extant piece and what I'm going to be showing you today. And unfortunately, I did not bring the other one down. So I recently, at the Arts and Sciences display for Griffin's Lair last year, or earlier this year, I guess. It seems like last year. I did a Boxing Tunic that had gussets and the Gores, and or the Gores of the right size. And that was one that I tried to make as more of a period replica. But the one I'm going to be showing you today is what I refer to as a modified version. It's often referred to as a Knockert Type 2. Again, Margaret Knockert, who wrote the book on the Boxing Tunic. The Knockert Type 1 would be using the gussets and the right size Gores, and the Knockert Type 2 is this modified version that I'm doing. So one of the things about the Boxing Tunic, I'm going to see if I can share. So I'm going to share the page from the Warburg's Museum. So this top part right here is the complete outfit. This is the extant piece. So we have, I don't know if you can see my mouse. So we have the hood, the cloak. This little sample right here is a close-up of the holes that were in him. This is the tunic right here. Can you see my mouse as I'm moving this? I can't tell. So this is the tunic here, and then the hose. As we scroll down here off to the right here, we see the cloak again. So this top image of the mantle that they have is the replica that they made off of the extant, and then this second one is the extant itself. Likewise, this second darker color image is the replica they made off the extant. This is the extant itself. And you can see on the right side here, there's a hole right about the rib cage. That's where the stakes were driven through him. So this longer image is the body. It's the body of the tunic itself. Once they pulled it apart, and again, this is the extent. You can see on both sides there's matching holes where those were. You can see this, the front slit is where they're gonna have that front gore. A second. Let's see, and so the neck is just a giant hole in the middle, but the whole thing is one piece for the front and the back. There's no seams at the shoulders. So this is a closer up image. Again, you've got the hole right here at the top of that image there. That's where the stake had been driven through. That's a little bit better image of what the neck hole looks like. These are the gores. So the important thing to notice about the gores here, I don't know, can anybody confirm whether or not you can see my cursor on the screen? Yeah, okay, great. So these, you'll notice these gores, these top ones, these are the front and back gores. And these longer, shorter, or thinner gores, these are the side gores. And one of the reasons that you're going to see a difference in the width on those is there's more width on the gore in the front and the back because that accommodates our stride. As we're walking, we have a longer stride front to back than we do side to side. So we don't need as much room in the sides of it. So the gores on the front are actually twice the width of the gores on the sides. So the gores on the front, for example, measure roughly 22 inches, and the ones on the sides are 11 inches. And then that's the hood. Those are the hose, and again, that's the replica of the hose, and this is the actual extent that they had. And so he's got his shoes, dagger sheath, his belt. Yeah, so that is the complete set. And again, that is all from the Barbird Museum. That's where the extant, that's where the collection is housed. So those are the pieces we're doing. So some of the differences in what they did, and also when they don't show them here because I'm not seeing the sleeves, but they also used armpit gussets in the sleeve to accommodate the width in the arm's eye, to make the arm's eye a little bit bigger. So a couple of the things that I do, and I think you can kind of see right here, you can kind of see where that gusset is. It's not a really good picture of it. I might have I don't know if my picture is any better. No, I don't think I have a better picture of that right now. So some of the differences between the extant and like the top type 1 and the type 2 is rather than using the armpit gussets, I just make a bigger arm's eye or a bigger sleeve head. The arm's eye is typically this area right here. Let me see if I can get to the better picture here. Let me bring that up now. So the arm's eye is generally the hole for where your arm, the sleeve head goes in. The sleeve head is the part of the sleeve that's at the top that goes into the arm's eye. Those are just a couple of common terms that we use when we're talking about this construction. So the arm's eye is the hole, and arm's eye is like spelled ARMS, like CYE or something like that. It's not spelled like your eyeball. So the arm's eye is the hole, and the sleeve head is the top of the sleeve that goes into the arm's eye. So what I do is I just make a bigger sleeve head because as you can see here, so this area right here is going to be the what would be the arm's eye, and you can see that it is cut in just a little bit, right? It's not heavily pronounced. It's not really rounded. It's not shaped like what we do for the kirtles of the same era and what we do even for the men's coat already in the same era. So there is a slight indentation in there that's been cut out to allow for to kind of cut it in a little bit, and I'll talk about that in a second. but that's where the sleeve head is going to go, and so that sleeve head is basically going to be that length right there. So I typically don't use the gussets for this unless I'm doing a replica for either a display or competition, because at 10, 20 feet away, what I do looks like a Boxsten Tunic, and I've laid out and taken a picture of one of my modified Boxing Tunics, and it looks curiously uh, just like that. It looks like this one right here when I lay it out. So at a distance, you can't really tell. So I've taken a very simple period garment and I've made some very reasonable modifications to make it even easier for us to make. So I've simplified it even further. That's not necessarily better, but it's easier. And for people with limited sewing skills, this is a really great outfit to start with, because again, it's all just straight line construction. You don't need to do any patterning. People have asked me, I've made some before and they're like, oh, can I get your pattern for my Boxsten? Like, no, you can't, but I can give you the measurements. And because that's all it is. Very similar to some of the earlier period Norse and Rus construction, the rectangular construction stuff, right? There's no pattern. It's just measurements. It's all just numbers. And if you have the numbers, you can just throw it together. I did a pattern for an apron dress for Baroness Bronwyn of Loxallen. She said she wanted an apron dress. I had her send me measurements, and I sent her a pattern it's just measurements. There's no, I sent her that pattern without seeing her at all. I didn't take any measurements. I didn't see her. I didn't have contact with her at all. And I just sent her measurements, and the dress worked perfectly for her. This is the same kind of thing. It is so simple that once you have the numbers, it's just numbers. There's no pattern, right? And so that's kind of why this is a really good outfit for people to start sewing with. Because if you can sew a straight line, you can do this. So I do, instead of doing the gussets, I just do I make the sleeve head a little bit bigger. And so I'll just do a straight line from the bigger arm's eye down, or the bigger sleeve head down to the wrist. And I'll show you how I cut that in a minute. The other thing that I do is I do all of the gores the same width. And what that does is that allows me to basically cut all 4 of my gores with one cut. And I'll show you how I do that in a minute. But what that means is, rather than having a 22-inch wide front gore and an 11-inch wide side gore, I just kind of split the difference on those, and I end up with 16 inches on the gores for all 4 of them. Again, I'll show you how I do that. One of the other things I do is for the sleeve, if I'm using linen, which is what I'm using today, rather than I'll cut the sleeve using the selvage of the linen, so that way it's already finished at the bottom, and I don't have to hem the bottom sleeve at all. So that's just kind of one of the tricks that I do to kind of save a little bit of work. So anyway, I think that's the gist of what this is, why it's important, how they did it in period, and some of the modifications that I make. So I'm going to just throw out real quick to see if anybody's got any questions about anything I've said so far. Right, cool. I'm an excellent instructor. Everybody understands everything. That's what I like to hear. Okay, so I am going to bring up the handout that I have for the handout that I use for this. So if you're playing along at home, so this is the handout that I have for it, which basically kind of goes over some of the stuff I've already talked about, including creative adaptation. That's the changes that I've made to it. It's again another picture of it. Let's see, 98-inch circumference on the hem. So the bottom edge there ends up being 98 inches all around. You can kind of see these lines right here are the front gore. So you can see that front gore is it's pretty wide at the bottom there. You can also see a faint image right here of the front image. The front gore is actually done in two pieces. So I wonder if this is a better image of it. Actually, the front and the back gore, you can see that those are two-piece gores. I do mine in just one piece. You see the side gore is two pieces, and I think this other side gore is just one piece. So that's just that's fabric usage in the Middle Ages. I mean, wool or linen was horribly expensive, and so you were going to use, even if you have the loom widths to do what you needed, and there were loom widths over 30 inches in the Middle Ages, but they weren't very common. So you can use every scrap of fabric that you can on this. So they're gonna have that. But with having 56-inch wide linen for $10 a yard, yeah, I'm gonna make some I'm gonna make some adjustments, and I'm going to use that the liberty that I have of having the loom widths and the fabric that I need to do this. But that's how they did it in period. Is there were two-piece gores, and a lot of times what they would do for consistency to make it kind of look the same, if they're using two-piece gores on some, they would actually do a false seam in the other gores, so that they all looked like they were two-piece, even though one was a one-piece, and they would actually fold it over, make a false seam in that just for the look. So this is the measurement chart that I use for this particular tunic. Okay, so the total length on this, the length on this was about 45 inches on the extent. And understand that was for somebody that was like 5'7". So the length on this is going to be at or below the knee. So wherever you want to measure that, you want to measure it at or below the knee. And then I generally add 3 inches to that, because you're going to lose some of that in the hem when you hem it up. So for instance, the measurement that I use on mine is, I think I base it on 48 inches. So basically you're going to measure that from the top of your shoulder down to your knee, and then again just add like 3 inches to whatever that is, and that'll give you basically the front half, and then you just double that. So because again the length of fabric is just one long piece of fabric for the body, and it's basically square or rectangle, but it's basically straight lines, right? So for instance, the measurement that I use for mine is 96 inches for the length of it. Okay, so then we have the chest measurement, and this may seem kind of confusing, so I'll explain. So basically you take the chest measurement. I think last time I measured mine, I was 42 or 44, I can't remember. But with that chest measurement, and also with this, when I say chest measurement, you need to measure the biggest circumference on your body that this needs to fit on. So if you got some belly fat going on, that's what you need to measure. And I don't say that for body shaming purposes, but if you want this to fit right, it's got to fit over all of you. So take the measurement off of the biggest measurement you have. Typically that is the chest measurement, but it's got to be the biggest measurement around where you want the body to fit. So, and then from there, I'm going to add just 5 inches, right? Just on the total number. And what that gives me is seam allowance for all this, for the two side seams that I need. And it gives me a little bit of breathing room, a little bit of ease in the fit. So if my chest measurement is 44, I'm going to add 5 inches to that. That gives me 49. If we were to call that 50, I would make the body at 25 inches. So that's where we get the chest measurement plus the 5 divided by 2. So that's where we get this. And so this number, this field over here, is going to be the width of the body as you cut it out in the fabric. And like I said, we 44 plus 5, 49. to cut that in half. It's just easier math to call it 25 than it is to call it 24 and a half. So I just call it 25, and that's going to give you even just a little bit more ease in that. So so the length would be 96. The width would be 25 on that. And so one of the things we have to understand about how these measurements work, hang on just a second. Sorry, I got to make sure that we don't have somebody else jumping in on the thing here. Okay, we're good. Go away. There you go. So one of the things to keep in mind about this and how this fits is the body measurement is based off of your chest circumference. Okay, you are bigger around than twice your shoulder width, right? You can't just measure the shoulders and double that and get the width of the body that you need, because it needs to fit all the way around, right? This is where one of the ways that this differs from some of the rectangular construction stuff that we see in the burqa and the headbee stuff, where you'd actually have you're putting in the side gores, and those side gores in those other examples, that creates the circumference that you need, right? But this doesn't do that, okay? So we're not filling in the space around the side. You do get a little bit of that in the armpit gusset, but you don't get that in the rest of the body. So we have to understand that in where the width of the body is, because it's bigger around than your shoulders are wide. What ends up happening is the body, the width of the body actually comes down your sleeve. It doesn't stop at the shoulder point. So when we measure the sleeve, we can't just measure from the shoulder point down to the wrist, because the body is going to be further down on the arm. Okay. What that also means, if you're bigger in the girth, if you have a lot of belly fat, or if you're just making it for somebody who's just big, the more circumference they have in the chest or in the belly, the wider the body fabric is going to be to accommodate the chest. That means that the further out you push that, the further and further down the arm that sleeve head is, or that arm's eye is going to be. So if you're building it for somebody that's really big, you have to put in the gussets, because you are going to have to cut in the fabric in there. I know Michelle's on here. I did one recently for her husband, Andy, and Andy's got like a 60-inch chest, right? That's a lot of dude to work with. And yeah, Bree's waving her hand because Richard has a 60+ inch chest. And in order to make this fit right, you are going to have to cut in on the arm's eye, and you're going to have to use the gussets to make up that room, because otherwise your arm's eye is literally going to be at your elbow. So with mine, it's like 2 or 3 inches down my shoulder. Not that big of a deal, but when somebody's that much bigger, it just pushes that so much further out that you're going to have to modify that. But for somebody that like me, for more average size folks, this works. So
I have a comment on that.
yes.
On women, it also, the way you fit that gore arranges for boob support.
Yes. Yep. And so, yeah, putting the, you mean the gore or the armpit gusset?
The armpit gusset.
Yeah.
I use that, the way I fit it with that, it because it's so much wider there,
right.
it does the breast support.
Right. And yeah, because when you're doing this for women, the breast measurement is bigger than the under breast measurement, which is the actual chest measurement. So yeah, with doing that with the armpit gussets, that provides more distance right at the breast line, right at the nipple line. So yeah, that also works. Yeah, I've done a couple of these for women, and I've just used the tapered sleeve that I'm doing, and it seems to fit okay. But yeah, doing that gusset in there, same reason. You know, when you have that much more room in the chest, yeah, you'll need to you can do that gusset to account for that. So the arm measurement that I use for this. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to measure from the center of your spine out to your wrist, however far on the wrist you want to do. And I usually do that with a slight bend in the elbow, not a full 90, but just a slight bend so it's comfortable. And I'll measure that generally down to the knuckle, because you can push the sleeve up if you need to. But if you measure it at the wrist, as soon as you start moving your arm, that starts kind of moving up there. So I generally do it down to the knuckle to give myself enough room to work with. And that's going to be from the center of your spine out to your wrist. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that full measurement and I'm going to subtract half of the body width. So what that gives me is from the center line, or from the half of the body width, that gives me, if I'm using 25 inches for the body, half of that is going to be from my spine to the edge of to the edge of the fabric, which is not necessarily the edge of my shoulder. So that's going to be to the edge of the fabric. So I've got that much of it, just that half of that body, and then the rest of the arm. So I think, I want to say when I measured mine last time, it was like maybe 31 inches from my spine out to my wrist. And the sleeve head that I've got on this, I want to say, or the sleeve length, I want to say is like 22 or 24 on this. So that's how I get the sleeve measurement, is you measure from the spine out to the wrist, and then you subtract half the body width. So in this case, it would be, if we're using 25 inches on the body width, we would be cutting out 13 inches off of that. So it's been a while since I cut this, so I'm not really sure how much I used on this. 12 and a half. Yeah, so I used 25 on this. So yeah, I take the total measurement from the spine out to the wrist and subtract 12 and a half inches off of that. You could probably add a half an inch for seam allowance, so you can cut off 12 inches maybe. So if you're using if it's 33 inches, for instance, out from your spine to your wrist, and you cut off 12 inches of that, then you're going to be looking at 21 inches for the sleeve length. Okay. For the sleeve head measurement, this is kind of just in a ballpark approximation, however you feel, whatever makes you feel comfortable. But basically, I've just drape a tape measure over your shoulder like this, and figure how far down you want that to go. That's going to give you enough ease to get in there. And that's really big. That's huge. I don't want that big. Let's go here. All right. So that's even way bigger there too. That seems like a lot bigger than it needs to be. I don't know. This is 31 inches. That doesn't seem right. Well, and also it's going to be, you also got to consider that it's getting pushed out, because the fabric is going to be further out from your body. So it doesn't have to be necessarily tight right there. The sleeve head that I'm working with here today is basically 24 inches. And that's been a pretty comfortable arm's eye for me, and sleeve head. So, but basically just kind of wrap it over your shoulder, and like you can even just do the front of it. Like if I come off my shoulder here and just measure straight down here, right? So that gives me 12 inches. That's probably where I got that measurement from before. So, because again, if you measure it all the way around here, you're measuring more of a circle there. But this here, just measuring from the top of my shoulder down to the middle of my rib cage. Yeah, that gives me about 12 inches. So that gives me 24 inches of sleeve head. Okay. And again, there's no arm side to measure. So once you get the sleeve head, you just put the sleeve head in. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. The wrist measurement, when we do the wrist measurement, there's a couple of different ways you can do this. You can use a kind of a coned hand so that when you put it through, you're gonna have to kind of cone your hand to get it through. That's about the minimal amount of space you would need to get that. You could do the fisted hand this way, which means you'd be able to put your whole hand in through there. One of the other things you can do is you can measure at the forearm. If you measure the fat part of your forearm, if you make it that big, that'll be a little bit bigger than it would be if it's a fisted hand, generally speaking. But if you make it bigger, just that much bigger than the forearm, then you can push your sleeves up if you're doing work. If that's something that would be of interest to you, you can push that up so you're not getting like if you're washing dishes or something, you're not going to get your hands, or you're not going to get your tunic soaked doing that. So that's another way that you can do it. I typically just do the fisted hand right there. So, and I think when I did it here, it was yeah, so I've got like 10, 11 inches on the fist, and then just add an inch to that per seam allowance. So that's going to be 12 inches for the wrist opening. Oops, let me go back. Okay, so go back. Okay, so the neck measurement. So this is something that I do that is, I actually picked this trick up from her name Goulinet up in Kingdom of Ontir. She came down and did some sewing for us, and she taught me many things. And this is one of the really neat tricks that she taught me. You can certainly do a keyhole neckline if that's more comfortable to you. Some people don't like having just the rounded neck. You like to have a keyhole because I've made one for a friend of mine who said that she doesn't like having the rounded neck because she's somewhat claustrophobic, and having that rounded neckline is just not comfortable. So you can certainly do a keyhole neckline in there, even though that's not what the extent has, but that's a reasonable modification for what we're doing. But to get the neck hole that we're looking here, and the neck hole is something that people struggle with a lot in finding, how to actually fit that neckline, because it always ends up being a lot bigger than you think it is. So, and this method, I don't want to say it's foolproof, but it's worked for me every single time. So what this is, so what we're going to do is we're going to take two measurements. You're going to see in the handout here, I've got one for sternum and I've got one for the base of the neck. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to find the top of the sternum, right where your collarbone meets. And we're going to go from there. We're going to measure straight out to basically where your neck meets your shoulder, right? And I think when I did this earlier on me, it was about 4 inches. Yep, pretty close. So it's kind of hard to do on yourself to figure out where that line is, but for me, it ends up being about 4 inches from the top of my sternum to just where my neck meets my shoulder, okay? Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the same measurement from the top of the shoulder down to where your collarbone is. And that, for me, I think I had 3.5 inches on that earlier. All right. Yeah, I did 3.5 inches on that. So from the top of the shoulder, right at that same point where your neck meets your shoulder right there, just the top there, just drop that down to your collarbone. So I've got 3.5 inches there, okay? And I think that's gonna be the first cut that we do, and I'll get to that in just a second, but that's how I get those two measurements. So it's just straight out there and straight down there, and you'll see how that works in just a second. It's really super slick. And then for the Gore length, what you want to do for the Gore length is you want to measure that from the top down rather than from the bottom up, because you're going to lose some in the hem when you finally do that. And so what we want to do is we want to take, again, from the top of the shoulder down to generally your natural waist, either naturally your bending point, wherever you want your body, wherever you want your tunic to start getting bigger. So that's where the gore is going to be. So if I was to do there, I'm looking at about 23 inches down from my shoulder. 23, 22. Yeah, about 23. So I'm measuring 23 inches down from my shoulder. And so if I have 48 inches in length on the front side of the tunic, and I subtract 23 inches off of that, that gives me 25 inches for the length of the gore. And so what that means is now I know where the gore is starting. I know that the gore is starting at my natural waist, my bend point, rather than having to calculate how much I'm losing on the bottom and how far up that needs to go, if that makes sense. Because at that point, you can mark that bend point and you can put the gore there and measure down from there. Let's see. So Simon, you got your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Could you go over that measurement again, the top of the shoulder to the waist? And then I was writing down and
Sure.
notes, and I missed what you said after that. There were some subtractions, and I missed that. I apologize.
Okay, no problem. So this again, this again is for figuring out how long you want your gores to be. Okay. So tell you what, let me see if I can. I'm gonna switch my camera. Got two cameras set up on this, so I've got the one on there. Okay. So I'm gonna take from the top of my shoulder, and I'm gonna measure down to my natural waist or wherever my bend point is. And then, so that's right there. Okay. So again, so what I'm doing is rather than figuring the gore from the bottom up, I'm figuring it from the top down. Okay. So I know that I want my gore to start here, right? And then however long it goes after that, I know that when I put this whole thing together, it's going to start here. It's going to start at that natural waist. And that means that I don't have to measure it from the bottom up and hope that it's long enough, if that makes sense. And I know it seems kind of backwards, but again, it comes into play more when you finish the hem, because when you finish that hem, it gets rounded off, and there's a bunch of that's going to get cut off, and I just find it's easier to measure where it starts and go down rather than starting from the bottom and figuring out how high up it needs to go. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So after that, so if it's 23 inches from the top of my shoulder down to my natural waist, and I'm using 48 inches on the length of the front of the tunic, so 23 minus 48 gives me a 25 inch gores. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense now. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Perfect. So that is how we get the measurements for the total length, chest measurement or the width of the body, the length of the sleeve head itself, the wrist measurement, the neck measurements, and the gores. Because yeah, when you get right down to it, it's a square body, sleeves, and gores. That's it. That's what this whole thing is. So, okay. Let's see. And in the handout here, I have a description of what each of those measurements is and how to get to that. So that might help out a little bit too. And then I've got basically a diagram that I wrote about what the different parts are going to be. So one of the nice things about this, again, with conservation of fabric and everything, because of the design I use for this, I'm getting this off of 56-inch wide linen. This linen I happen to get from fabricstore.com. It will work very differently with 45-inch, 45 wide fabric. So that's something you definitely want to take into consideration, that this is off of 56 wide. And with that, I get the body is 25 inches. This sleeve is the longest portion after that at like 24 inches. So I get the whole tunic off of whatever the length is. So I get the whole tunic off of, in this case, 98 inches of fabric, which is about 2.5 yards. So yeah, you can get a whole tunic off of 2.5 yards of fabric. So that's less than $40 of material. I mean, even at $15 a yard, that's less than $45 a yard, right? So if you can get cheaper fabric, that's even better. But yeah, I happen to get this from fabricstore.com, which is my primary source for 100% linen. Looking at the screen now. So okay. So any other questions before I get into the cutting portion? I'll make sure nobody else is waiting. All right, good deal. Okay, so oh yeah. Stop sharing the screen. And can y'all see that? So this is cutting the neck out. Okay, and I already drew some of this stuff on here just for making it a little bit quicker. So and also I always mention this on my classes that I use this quilting pen, this chalk pencil. This is available in the quilting section of Joann's. Kit's got what are you using there? Felt pen. So yeah, I love these pens. They're available in the quilting section. It costs like $18, but if you got a Joann's coupon, you can save $50 on that easy, or 50% on that. So I love these pencils. It's got the chalk just kind of goes in like this. I love it. Okay. So anyway, hey baby. So what I've done here is so this line here is the measurement from my sternum. That's what I refer to as the sternum measurement. So that's the one from from the top of my sternum out to where my neck is, and I think that was 4. I think I did 4 inches on that. So yeah, just right at 4 inches. Okay, and then this other line right here, and this is on a fold. Okay, so what I've done is, let me see if I can. So this is the body, right? So 25. It's this right now is 12.5 inches because I've got it folded in half, right? And 96 inches on the length. Okay, so this is the body piece that I'm working with. And so what I've done is I've quartered this. So I quartered it by. So what you see here is the total length of the fabric. So this is where the neck hole is going to be. But I just folded the fabric in half. And you see this right here, right? And I've got the front and the back here, right? So the front of the neckline is going to be lower than the back of the neckline, right? Like we don't want it exactly a full circle going front and back, because that ends up cutting down on the back of your neck there, or it goes further down the back of your neck. Oh, we're around that out a little bit. So what I've done is, so this is the measurement from the top of the shoulder down to the sternum. That's 3.5 inches. So I measured, put that at 4 inches, put this at 3.5 inches, and then just kind of rounded out that circle right there. Right, that's going to be the front neckline. And then for the back neckline, I just went about an inch down, and just do an inch there, and then just round that out to the end there. Does it make sense? Okay. So now what I'm going to do is first I'm going to cut out the back, and I'm cutting it out of all 4 layers at this point, right? So I'm cutting this is the back line, because we know that the front is going to be at least this far down, so we can cut it out of the back first, or we can cut out the back portion of it first, right? So now I'm going to open this up. Looks like I already marked it before. I'm going to open this up, but I just want to cut the front of this. Okay. So that's the back here, right? I'm not going to go lower than that. And so where those lines were folded, I just line those 2 lines up there. Hopefully you can see that okay. And then I've got this cut right here. Okay. So now that gives me neckline very similar to what you saw in the extent there. Okay. Now I'll show you this. As I put this on, over my head, you're going to notice that it just barely goes over, right? It doesn't, there's not a lot of, I'm sure this is super cute. So there's not a lot of space around, so it just barely goes over. And that's okay, that's what we want, because when we finish that neckline, we're gonna do it with, I typically do it with a bias tape, but you could do it with a facing as well, or even if you do a rolled hem. However you finish that neckline, you're gonna be losing about a ½ inch all the way around. And so that gives you, that will give you the ease that you need to be able to put it on. So if you cut this out using this method, and you put it over your head, and you have to kind of wiggle it down a little bit, as long as you can do it without stretching it, without ripping it, that's fine. That's exactly where it's supposed to be. A lot of people want to have that much bigger so that it just easily goes over. But again, when you finish off that neckline, you're going to end up with this gigantic neck hole that just doesn't look the same. So that's one of the things about how I cut that out. Yeah, it's super simple. And like I said, I don't want to say it's foolproof, but I have every one of these that I've done for just round neck hole. For some reason, those measurements it fits over your head perfectly. So there is that. Any questions about that? I can't tell if people raise their hand or not. So, doing good? Okay, so let's see. Let's move on to the sleeve. Okay. Okay, so this is the sleeve. Make sure nobody else waiting. Okay, so for the sleeve, I have, so when I cut out this sleeve, this is, I cut out the length of it that I need, which I think on this, I made, what I make, 21? Is that what I said? How long is this? I've got this at 23, right? So what I do is I cut it out at 23, and I cut it out at, I cut out what a rectangle that is the width of 2 sleeves. Okay, so I've got 24, so this one rectangle would be 48 inches. Okay, so it's 48 by 23. And then what I've done is I've quartered this so that I have, so that's going to be one sleeve. Those two pieces right there. Well, actually, that's the inside sleeve. That's the outside sleeve. So I've got the, and then I've got, this is actually on a fold here as well. So I've got a fold here and I've got two there. Okay. But once we're cutting through this on this line here, so I'm not worried about that fold. Okay. But they, again, this is both of the sleeves with the full arm's eye. And I just take 48 inches wide, 23 inches long, and then I just quarter that fabric and just fold it over. So then what I've done on the end, so with where the sleeve is, and again, I'm using the selvage edge down here, so I don't have to hem that later. So the this is the full length of the arm's eye right there, the full sleeve head right there, right? And down on this end where the wrist opening is, I've got that at, what do I say, 6 inches. It's never just a hip girl. 6 inches, 5.5, 6 inches, right? Okay. So, and then I've just drawn this straight line right there. Okay. Ordinarily, this is the area where you would have a gusset. So you might cut it a little more like this and then have a gusset in here. But for the sake of simplicity, this is, again, one of the modifications that I've made off the extant, where I'm getting 2 sleeves in one cut. So I just make that at the wrist measurement that I need there, make that at the arms I need right there, and I'm getting both sleeves in one cut.
Is anyone else really enjoying the sound of Sean cutting the fabric?
It must be me. So there's 2 sleeves. I'm actually a bit better. All right. Any questions so far? Pretty clever, right? Let's take a demonstration. I'm gonna get another piece of fabric here. Okay, so for cutting the gores, very similar method here. Okay, so all right, for cutting the gores, so I think this one ended up being 24. Yeah, 24. What did I say before? 25. 20, yeah, 25. So 24, 25 for the length of the gore. So what I've done with this is, I'm going to see if I can kind of maybe demonstrate this a little bit with this. So again, I figured the width of the sleeve was just going to be, or the width of the gores, I calculated it like, I think 16 inches, again, because I'm splitting the difference between we're on the extent, the bottom gore or the front gores are twice the width of the side gores. And I'm just making them all the same width so that I can do all of these in one cut. And I think on this I've got, so yeah, I'm gonna have 8 inches. Yeah, 8 inches on the fold. So yeah, about 16 inches, 15 to 16 inches on the width for all 4 gores. Okay. And so the way that I do this for the gore, and I'll show you the cut in just a second, but the idea of it is this. So I'm taking a chunk of fabric, and I'm gonna quarter this again, and with where the folds end up being, you'll see how this works. And again, this is really super slick. So like for instance, I have it, folded on this edge, so I've got a fold right there, and then I would I would fold it again here, right? And so I've got one fold there, and I've actually got 2 layers of fold here, okay? And so as I do this line right here and make that cut, you'll see how this works. But that's just kind of want to show you the gist of it right there. Okay, so that's what this is. And I have, here I have, these are both open, right? And then I have the fold here, okay? And so this is 2 layers of fold on this side right here, okay? And you can see that I've got just one diagonal line. What I have done here at the top though, is I have made this a 1/2 inch bigger right there. That gives me seam allowance, okay? So rather than pulling this straight to a straight point right there, by doing that seam allowance right there, that gives me a little bit extra to work with. So I just moved that in just a 1/2 inch there. And I think I did 8 inches total on this edge. So this one here is actually just gonna end up being like 7.5 inches, but it's still gonna be pretty close. But yeah, I just had that right there, and I've done the same up on this edge right here as well. So, all right, Michelle, you ready for me to cut fabric again? I know how much you like that.
Oh, I'm just excited.
There, I hope that was everything you imagined it to be. Okay, so what this gives me by doing this fold this way is I get two solid gores out of the 1/2. I get one more solid gore out of the other 1/2. And I get 2 1/2 gores out of the other 1/2. So now what I'm going to do is I will sew this together. You're going to lose seam allowance on the back gore, so the back gore is going to be just an inch smaller and about an inch shorter than the front gores. But basically, I just take this one and I put it in the back where nobody's really going to see it. So 3 solid gores and then the 2 1/2 gores. I'm going to just sew those up together right there, and that's all my gores. And I get all my gores with one cut. So again, for the sake of simplicity, for making an already simple garment even easier to make, that's how I do the gores, and that's how I do the sleeves. And so really, with that, that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's like I said, the body, sleeves, and 4 gores. At some point soon here, I'm going to be doing a class on forcing the gore, how to get that gore in the split, because for the front and the back gores, you're cutting a split into the fabric. And doing gores into a side seam is super easy because you just match up the seams and you're just sewing straight up through it. But the forcing the gore in the split it takes some practice, and it's a little bit complicated. So I'm going to be doing a class on that pretty soon. I've got some tips on that. There's actually there's a site called Lacote Simple. Lacote is just LE space COTE. It's called Lacote Simple. It's a 14th century costumer who, that's the tutorial that I use for how to do that. But I'll be doing a class on that. I'll also be doing, I think in that same class, I'm going to be doing flat felt seams as well. So you guys can look for that coming up soon. Just some tips and tricks on how to finish.
When is that one going to be?
I don't know. I haven't really scheduled anything, but I'm hoping soon. Like I said, when I schedule that though, I will put it up on the Artemisia Arts and Sciences page as an event, so you'll be able to follow there.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it. Again, I love working with the Boxing because it's like we have like undeniable proof that it existed right in the middle of the 14th century. And I mean, as a complete set of clothing, you really can't get more primary source than pulling something out of a frickin' bog and then making clothes based on that. That's why I love working with this as much as I do. And yeah, just made it a little easier to work with. So that's pretty much it. Do we have any other questions before we go?
Real quickly.
Yes.
Is the Boxton one of the ones that was in the Woven into the Earth book?
No.
Okay.
They're gonna have a lot of what's in Woven into the Earth is Greenland and Iceland.
Okay.
There's going to be similar construction, but those are based on what is often referred to as the Hrolfni collection. I can't even. I know it's HR or something or other, but yeah, Hrolfni's. But yeah, that's Woven into the Earth is also a great book. In that, you're going to find similar examples closer to the burqa and headbeat finds that I was talking about earlier, where they have the doors in the side of the body, which is actually better fitted than the Boxton is. So they're actually a closer fit, because whereas the Boxton, you just make the body that much bigger. For the headbeat stuff, the burqa and the headbeat, the rectangular construction stuff, the body of that is at the shoulders, and they make up that room in the side gores. The math on doing that is kind of complicated, but once you have a good pattern for that, once you have the good math on that, they fit really well. They look good. But this is a slightly different construction. But Woven in the Earth is also a great book.
Because it looks like yours is the one-piece sleeve.
Right.
But it's kind of instead of being a squared, it's more of a hex or a
Yeah, mine is definitely an angled sleeve from the and again, I do that so that I can cut out the gussets, because I understand the use of gussets in period, but with having the luxury of fabric width as I do, doing gussets is just I can do them. I just hate it.
Duke Sean is a slacker.
It's just an
I
extra
think you need
step.
to wag the finger.
It's an extra step.
Yeah.
There are ways to do gussets that don't suck.
Well, apparently I need to be taught what those ways are, because I have yet to find a way to do gussets that doesn't suck. It's not that they're hard, it's just an extra step.
And it's a
They're
pain.
just they're unnecessary.
Yes, you are
And
correct.
They are unnecessary.
I will show you how to do it so that it doesn't suck.
I can do it.
I know.
It's just
I've
unnecessary.
got a way to. I figured out a way so that they don't suck.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing, by doing this with the angled sleeve the way that I've done, as I'm trying to make this so that people who are not interested in doing gussets and not learning how to do gussets, and people that are using a sewing machine for the first time, I can give you a method where you can pretty much anybody can go to a sewing machine with this design and make straight lines. That's kind of how I've done it.
I don't use a machine, so that's okay.
Well, I guess you can hand sew your straight lines then. I've done several of these hand sewn, and with us being in the pandemic and everything, I'm probably going to go ahead and hand sew this one too, because I don't have a timeline. I don't have a timeline to finish it on, and I'll probably do it just for the sake of doing it, just to improve my hand sewing skills, which I must say are pretty good to begin with.
Pretty good.
All right. Passable.
You're adequate.
Sean, you mentioned that I have started sewing things by hand and flat felling all of my seams. So you know what? I give you a mass amount of crap like all the time because I have to, but you are such an inspiration to so many of us.
Oh, thank you, dear. I tell you, it was Goulinet that that impressed upon me, especially with linen, that the seams have to be finished somehow. They don't necessarily have to be flat felt seams, but they have to be finished, because if you're using linen, if you don't finish it, and I've had this, I've done outfits where I didn't finish the linen and it shreds. It shreds right to the seam, and then it starts shredding through the seam. So they have to be finished. And you know, when we were in our last train, when we were when I was making all the roofs and North stuff for my wife, because that was something that was new to me, and I was kind of doing, everything was like prototypes and mock-ups. I ripped those out on a serger to finish off the seams, because I'm like, I don't want to spend how many hours I'm going to do doing flat felt seams on an outfit that I don't know works. And then unfortunately, yeah, most of the ones that she had ended up being serged. But you know, when I now that I know that I have a pattern for her that works on that, when I decide to do one for real for her, then yeah, I can do those. So you got to finish the seam somehow, and you know, for linen, flat felt seam just looks great, and it's super easy.
Yeah.
So, alrighty. Any other questions?
If you want to flat fell seams, I have discovered the easiest way to do it is actually using those wonder clips instead of like pins, because it
Okay.
actually, I'll do an entire seam and use those, and it will like basically iron the fabric for me. So then I get a really nice, clean, fast seam on it.
Wonder clips?
Underclips.
Okay.
Yeah, they're like little binder clips. They're cool.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
They're pretty heavy.
The little clip.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
don't buy the Wonder Clip brand because they are stupid expensive. Just go on Amazon and just type in like Wonder Clips. They
Yeah, like,
have made so much easier.
like bulldog clips?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're similar.
Interesting.
One of the things that I do is I have a 5-step ironing plan that basically takes, and I've showed Sean this, but it's the, you know, how do you get seams to lay really, really flat? And if you use that step plan, you don't even need clips because it just stays put.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing. This one that I'm doing for my wife right now with the flat felt seams is I've ironed those over and folded them over so that, yeah, I don't need to pin them.
Yeah. Yeah, and just a reference, be ruthless with your iron.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Your friend,
Loves irons.
Yeah, and if at all possible, iron the inside, iron the outside,
Yeah.
butterfly it, iron it some more.
Yeah.
Get those
Don't
laid
be
flat.
afraid of the starch. The starch will.
I don't use starch.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Aren't you awesome, Sean? I like starch and Wonder Clips.
I use a lot of steam. Definitely use the steam on the iron.
Yeah, he's used starch before, but it has been decades.
It's been a quarter century since I had to starch anything.
Yes, this is true. However, if you are working on very, very thin linen,
Yeah.
like handkerchief or gauze weight, I do seriously suggest starching your linen or using sizing if you're afraid of starch. Start with spray sizing. It's like half strength starch anyway. And you can iron it so that it stays put.
Right.
And that way it doesn't wobble as much. So, you know.
Did you have a question? Catherine, did you have a question or comment?
I was just going to say, one of the first things I learned many years ago about using linen is make sure when you get your linen that the wool and the wet don't look crooked, because when they cut it sometimes in the factories, they can actually cut it off. And it looks a little bit, off of it. So if you make sure when you wash it, you make sure you iron it. That was the one thing that will put them back in line.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. All righty. Well, thank you everybody for joining me. Appreciate you tuning in there. Hopefully this has been helpful to you, and you can go make some outfits for yourself.
Yes.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, guys.